I've been in the business since I was 15, working for my grandmother's place. She cooked, I cleaned and waitressed. And cleaned some more. Teresita, no solamente lo tenemos limpio, sino también seguro. No algunas veces, sino todo el tiempo. People worry about growing up and becoming their mothers. I worry about growing up and becoming my grandmother. It doesn't matter if it was my grandmother's place, the steakhouse, or the seafood place I've worked since then, or here in my own restaurant. We have a real responsibility to protect our customers.
I don't care if you're a dishwasher, busboy, maintenance worker, or hostess. We all have a very serious obligation that begins when the deliveries come in the back door to the time the customer walks out the front door smiling.
No. It starts before that. Our obligation starts the moment we get ready to come to work. Food safety is important for all our customers, but what you may not realize is that some people have a higher risk of contracting a foodborne illness than others.
Especially those with weaker immune systems, like pregnant women, the very young, and the elderly. You can't take anything for granted in this business, and a few simple steps can go a long way towards keeping food safe. A foodborne illness outbreak can do a lot of harm to a lot of people. Customers and coworkers can get sick and even make others sick. And then the consequences just pile up. You lose your customers. You lose your reputation. Your place becomes a joke, and morale goes right down the drain. You can get sued and embarrassed by the media. Your people can lose their jobs, and you can lose your business. That's a big responsibility.
When you come right down to it, following food safety practices is not only the right thing to do, it's the only thing to do. Not some of the time, not most of the time, but all of the time. There's a couple of things that are absolutely key to food safety.
You have to know what a foodborne illness is and how it occurs. You have to know how foods become unsafe. And you have to know what to do as food flows through your operation, step by step, from the back of the house all the way to the front.
Watch out.
Sorry.
Lo siento, Teresa.
Está bien, no te preocupes. Make sure your staff knows what to do, too. That might have cost me a piece of chicken, but in the long run, it might have saved me a bundle.
Hey, Teresa.
But dropping food on the floor is by no means the only way a person can get sick. There's a whole list of hazards out there that can make food unsafe.
And you can put these hazards into 3 groups: biological, physical, and chemical. Most foodborne illness is caused by biological hazards, microorganisms that are so small they can be seen, tasted, or smelled.
There's 4 types of microorganisms that can contaminate food: bacteria, viruses, parasites, and fungi.
The biggest culprit in foodborne illness is bacteria, and in order to grow, they need food, low acidity, oxygen, moisture, a little time, and the right temperatures. In short, just about any conditions that can support life. Once bacteria begins to grow, it's like a rapid chain reaction, and if someone eats that food, an illness can develop. Foods that allow microorganisms to grow are called potentially hazardous foods. The list is pretty long, and it covers just about everything most establishments use. It includes fish, poultry, meat, and dairy products. Foods such as cut melons, sprouts, and cooked vegetables are also potentially hazardous.
There's other biological hazards to watch for, too, like some of the toxins found in seafood. And since we can eliminate them by cooking, it's very important to purchase these items from approved suppliers.
The other hazards to be careful of are physical ones, like the things that accidentally find their way into your customers' meals: toothpicks, metal shavings, hair, bones, bits of plastic. Food can also be contaminated by chemicals that have spilled onto the food.
And some foods can cause severe or fatal allergic reactions in people. Make sure that you and your staff can answer questions regarding the ingredients in your food.
Let me tell you about the 3 factors that directly cause foods to become unsafe: time and temperature abuse, cross-contamination, and poor personal hygiene. To prevent time and temperature abuse, it's crucial to remember the temperature danger zone. You're in the danger zone whenever the temperature of a potentially hazardous food falls between 41 and 140 degrees Fahrenheit, or 5 and 60 degrees Celsius. Foods cannot spend more than 4 hours in that dangerous range. In the temperature danger zone, microorganisms can reproduce very rapidly. Thousands can grow in just an hour. Another cause of foodborne illness is cross-contamination. This occurs when microorganisms are transferred from one food or surface to another, carried by either utensils, hands, or other foods.
And the biggest cause of foodborne illness? Poor personal hygiene, whether it's through forgetfulness, neglect, or just being too busy. People are the major culprits when it comes to food contamination.
At home or on the job, people that don't wash their hands properly or often enough are the biggest contamination risks. They're the biggest contributors to foodborne illness.
You know, you run the highest risk when you're busy. That's when good habits start to slide a little. So I'm always after my people to wash their hands. They kid me about it, but they know I'm serious.
But hand washing isn't the only thing. You can also contaminate food by working when you're sick, not covering cuts properly, and not removing jewelry. Watches too. There's also the people who smoke and don't realize they've contaminated their hands. There's traces of saliva on the cigarette, and that gets on their fingers. More than likely, they don't wash their hands afterwards.
That must be the delivery. Alfredo, recíbela, por favor.
When you look at how food flows through your operation, handling deliveries properly is absolutely critical. And I'm not just talking about checking the count. The first thing to remember is that you cannot improve the quality or the safety of the food after you've already received and signed for it. So start by checking every delivery. If the food doesn't meet your standards, send it back. You're not only making sure you're getting what you paid for, you're inspecting the deliveries for possible problems. Check everything for proper temperature, appearance, proper labeling, and signs of mishandling. Food should flow quickly into storage immediately after receiving. Don't leave deliveries sitting around. Then, make certain you store everything properly to prevent cross-contamination. When you prep foods, make sure you limit the amount of time they spend in the temperature danger zone. Then, handle the food properly to prevent contamination. The next step is cooking. Always use calibrated thermometers to ensure that you have cooked foods to their required internal temperature. When you're holding cooked food, make sure it's covered and held at 140 degrees Fahrenheit, 60 Celsius, or higher. If you're holding cold foods, check to be certain the temperature is 41 Fahrenheit, 5 Celsius, or lower. While serving, take care not to touch the food or anything that comes in contact with it. When it comes to cooling, remember that food must be cooled rapidly. You can use ice water baths, blast chilling, or ice paddles, whatever works for you.
And be just as careful when reheating. Reheat food for hot holding to 165 degrees 74 Celsius for a minimum of 15 seconds within 2 hours. Whatever you do, always remember the basics of food safety. Keep things clean and sanitized.
Have your staff practice good personal hygiene. Make sure they wash their hands thoroughly and frequently. Don't forget about time and temperature abuse, and minimize the amount of time food spends in the temperature danger zone. And make sure you establish practices that prevent cross-contamination of food and anything it comes in contact with.
Just remember, take nothing for granted when it comes to food safety, no matter what your job is. Following proper food safety practices is not only the right thing to do, it's the only thing to do. Like my grandmother said, no algunas veces, sino todo el tiempo.
How are we doing on fries? Fine. Okay. All right, hold on just 2 seconds. I can get you the fries. Why don't you go ahead and grab another basket, okay? All right. Here you go. What do you need, Roberto?
I need to take it.
That's it? I suppose that talking about proper personal hygiene is just going to make some people shrug because they figure it's the simple stuff that everybody knows, right? But it's really stuff that gets taken for granted a lot. Like washing your hands. My little girl's been doing it since she was 2, standing on a chair by the sink. So what's the big deal, right? That's just it. Oh, it is a big deal. One of the first things I learned when I took the food safety course is that it's the little things that matter most. You know, the things you take for granted. Like washing your hands right and wearing a clean apron. These are the things I stress most when I'm training new people.
I've been working with Annie for over a year now. And when she told me why we do things this way, I was surprised to find out how easily food can get contaminated. She's right. It's the little things that matter most. Because in this business, every other minute I'm touching something a little greasy, a little dirty. And it's not like this job is sweat-free.
You will contaminate your hands, and they'll contaminate food. Because hands are the biggest source of contamination of food, which can cause foodborne illness. And that can be serious for your customers, for your coworkers, and for you. So it's no surprise that hand washing and good personal hygiene are the most important things you can do to keep food safe.
Customers expect us to practice good hygiene. They look for it. If they don't see it, they'll walk right out.
So it's real important to know the basics and to really drill it into your staff. Even the obvious things, especially the obvious things, because people take the obvious things for granted. So where do you start? With the basics. This is what everyone needs to know. Food can be contaminated so easily, it's scary. And there's so many ways it can happen if it's not handled properly. Then there's just basic personal cleanliness, you know, that everyone should practice. On top of that, everybody on staff should learn the proper way to wash their hands and when to do it. And even though I know washing your hands seems like common sense, you'd be surprised how few people do it right and often enough. Oh, and you need to know how to use gloves properly. It's amazing how easily people can contaminate food. Forget to wash your hands after using the restroom and you will contaminate everything you touch, especially food.
The same with touching your hair, face, or body, and then touching food.
Or coughing, or sneezing near food or food surfaces.
Touching or scratching a cut or sore, and then touching food.
Touching anything that can contaminate food, such as trash or telephones, and then touching food.
Or handling food when you're sick.
Your personal habits are important because they directly affect food safety. And the personal hygiene practices that apply at work actually begin at your home when you get ready for work each day. So good practices start at the beginning of your day. This means showering or bathing daily. It means your fingernails should be clean and trimmed, and you really shouldn't be wearing nail polish or false fingernails. The same goes for jewelry or watches. Don't wear them at work. And you should wear the proper clothing when you're at work. That means clean uniforms and aprons. And remember that your apron and clothes aren't towels. It's also important to take your apron off and store it properly before using the restroom or performing any other task that may contaminate it. Always wear a hat or hairnet to restrain your hair, even if it's shorter than Greg's. It keeps hair away from food and keeps you from touching your hair. Don't eat, drink, or smoke, or chew tobacco, or chew on straws or toothpicks while preparing or serving food. We don't want to serve up any surprises to our customers. And always, always wash your hands thoroughly and often.
Think about it. In this business, your hands are your utensils. They should be the cleanest part of your body. You can never forget it. This is probably the simplest rule, but it's probably the one that's bent, broken, or forgotten most often.
That's why I made a list of when my people should wash their hands, and I posted it where they can see it. Here's when you should do it. After using the restroom, before and after handling raw food, after touching your hair, your face, or your body,
After coughing or sneezing into your hands, when switching from one food handling task to another,
after handling any chemical,
before and after changing gloves, after clearing tables or bussing dirty dishes,
after sweeping, mopping, or taking out the trash, before and after break, and after eating, drinking, or smoking, and anytime you come in contact with anything, anywhere that can contaminate your hands. Don't ever wash your hands at a pot sink or a utility sink, and definitely not a food prep sink. A dedicated hand washing sink is the only place to wash your hands, and do it right. A quick rinse won't do the job.
Let me show you how I do it. First, you wet your hands with hot running water, as hot as you can stand. Next, apply enough soap so that you can build up a good lather. Then rub your hands together for at least 20 seconds. Working the lather up past your wrists and up over any exposed portion of your arms. Make sure to clean under your fingernails and between your fingers. Then, rinse thoroughly with running water before drying your hands.
And you should be just as careful when you're wearing gloves. For starters, gloves should never be worn instead of hand washing. And you should always wash your hands before putting the gloves on and when changing to a fresh pair. When should you change them? When they're dirty or torn, and before taking on a different task. And always change them after handling raw meat and before handling cooked or ready-to-eat food. Well, so much of this is common sense, but the busier you are, the easier it is to let your good habits slide. Remember, it's the little things that cause contamination, like not washing your hands after using the restroom.
And you should start your good hygiene practices at home before you get to work. Take a bath or shower every day.
You've got to wash your hands anytime they come in contact with anything that can contaminate them.
If you're wearing gloves, don't forget to wash your hands before putting them on. And change them between tasks, or whenever they're dirty or torn.
We've got these rules to keep food safe and to protect everyone's health. We have them because food is so easily contaminated. Stay on top of things and take nothing for granted. Remember the little things. Keep yourselves clean, and you'll keep your food safe.
I have to be in 2, maybe 3 places at the same time. If it weren't for my staff, I couldn't get this job done. You know, it's just like what they said at Purdue and in the management training program here. It's the thousands of things that take place behind the scenes that satisfy the customers and really makes them happy and keeps them safe. And right at the top of that list are safe purchasing, receiving, and storage. No matter where you work, you got to start with purchasing and receiving, because that's where the flow of food begins for us. If the food isn't safe when it comes in through that back door, there is no way that we can make it safe later. There are several things that you need to know at this point in the flow of food. You need to know how to choose a good supplier, how to properly calibrate a thermometer, when to accept or reject a delivery, and how to properly store food after it's been received. But you got to start with a good supplier. Suppliers must be licensed where necessary. You know, like shellfish suppliers, for instance, and reputable. Suppliers with good reputations, they will be more than willing to walk you through their operations and show you how they follow food safety practices. Now, once you know that they're doing a good job, it's your turn. Well, before any food is delivered to your establishment, you got to work with your supplier to set up a convenient delivery time. Then you got to make sure that you have enough well-trained hands on deck to receive and inspect that delivery. Now, what do I mean by well-trained? Well, these folks have got to know what they're doing, and they also have to have the power to say no, to reject any order that does not meet specification.
Well, as soon as the food gets off the truck, but before it's signed for, they check it from top to bottom. Now that means no swollen or dented cans or food that has passed its expiration date. And no packages that show signs of damage, thawing and refreezing, or pests.
I'm the customer in this situation, and you can bet I'm going to be demanding.
All items are inspected immediately and they're put away as soon as possible, especially the temperature-sensitive products. Now, since so much depends on keeping food temperatures out of the danger zone, I make sure my staff has the right thermometers and knows exactly how to use them.
Well, we have to calibrate our thermometers often just to make sure that they're accurate. If you don't do this, taking the temperature is a complete waste of time. Now, there's several different methods that you can use to calibrate a thermometer, but the ice point method is the most widely used. First, what you got to do is to fill a container with crushed ice. Then you add cold tap water. Then you stir it all up until you have a thick slush. Put the thermometer stem or probe into that ice water so that the sensing area is completely submerged. Then wait until the indicator stops moving. If you're calibrating a bimetallic stem thermometer, you got to keep the stem in the slush and then hold the adjusting nut securely with a wrench or some other tool while rotating the head of the thermometer until it reads 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius. If it's a digital thermometer and has a reset button, push it while the probe is in the slush to reset the readout. Now, before you check the temperature of food, you must first clean and sanitize that probe. When checking temperatures, insert that thermometer probe into the thickest part of the product. Now, that's usually right in the center. Then wait until that needle stops moving. Now, to take the temperature of sealed food, place the thermometer stem or probe between two packages and just kind of press them together. With liquids, insert the thermometer stem or probe into the liquid until it is submerged. Now, make sure that you do not let that stem or probe touch the sides or the bottom of the container. And when you're taking the temperature of bulk food or liquids, fold the bag over the stem or probe. No supplier is going to send you obviously spoiled food, but it does take trained senses to be able to detect those little subtle differences. And here at the Pierpont, we check everything for those subtle differences in color, texture, smell. Now, what you want to look for in meat, when you touch it, it should be firm and moist, not slimy or sticky. And it should not have an odor. And it should be bright red or pink, not brown, greenish, or purple. The internal temperature must be 41 degrees 5 Celsius or lower. And there must be a mandatory inspection stamp. Reject the delivery if these standards aren't met. Well, here at the Pierpont, we usually receive our chicken packed on self-draining crushed ice or in chill packs. Now, it should be firm and moist and not sticky to the touch. And reject poultry that is purple or green around the neck or has dark wingtips. Sniff it. It should have no odor. Poultry should have an internal temperature of 41 degrees 5 Celsius or lower. And look for the mandatory inspection stamp on the box. The fresh fish should be received at 41 degrees 5 Celsius or lower. Most of our fresh fish is received at around 32 degrees or 0 degrees Celsius. You want to look for bright red gills and shiny skin. If the gills are gray or the skin is dry and dull, just send it on back. The eyes should be bright and clear, not cloudy, red-rimmed or sunken. Fresh fish should not smell fishy, nor should it have a strong ammonia smell. The flesh should be firm and spring back when you touch it. If touching it leaves an impression or it starts to come apart, refuse it. Fresh shellfish must be received alive, and you gotta check and retain the shell stock tags. Now, your eggs should be received at an air temperature of 45 degrees, 7 Celsius or lower, and stored immediately at 41 degrees, 5 Celsius or lower. And they should be marked with a use-by date and arrive clean and unbroken. They should not have an odor. Crack one open, it should have a firm yolk. Liquid, frozen, and dry eggs, they must be pasteurized. With your milk, butter, and cheese, they should be received at a temperature of 41 degrees, 5 Celsius or lower, unless your jurisdiction requires another temperature. Well, here at the Pierpont, we receive several different kinds of vacuum-packed foods, and we treat them with the same kind of care that we would any other potentially hazardous food. Now, they should be received at 41 degrees, 5 Celsius or lower, unless otherwise specified by the manufacturer. Frozen products should be received frozen. There should be no sign of large ice crystals. Now, that would be an indication that the food has been thawed and then refrozen. If frozen food has been partially thawed or the package is leaking, reject it. All packaged dry goods should be intact and in good condition. They should not be torn or ripped. If they're damp or there are signs of moisture stains, send them back. Let me repeat two things here. One, if the food is not safe when it comes in through that back door, you cannot make it safe later. And two, you are the customer here, and you have paid for good, quality, safe food, and you should get what you pay for. As soon as the deliveries have been inspected, go right ahead and make sure that everything is properly stored. Be just as careful as you were when you first received the food. And the storage space should be cleared ahead of time to accommodate that shipment. Now, we want to be able to store the food away quickly, and this is especially true for temperature-sensitive products. When storing your deliveries, there are some general rules that apply. You want to keep that storage area dry and clean. You don't want to risk contamination from leaks and spills. And you never want to store anything on the floor, and keep that food away from chemicals and cleaning supplies. Write the date that the product was received or stored on each package, then follow FIFO, the first in, first out principle. Store the food so that the oldest product gets used first. It'll help to arrange everything on shelves so that older food is closest to the front. Now, your refrigerators only slow the growth of microorganisms. Now, that's why you gotta check the temperature of the product stored inside. The temperature of the products must be 41 degrees 5 Celsius or lower. Make it part of the routine to check both the inside and the outside thermometers. But remember, the most important thing is product temperature. Now, to keep them running efficiently, never overload refrigerator units or line the shelving inside. This can block airflow, and the unit will have to work harder to stay cold. Make sure all food products are properly wrapped or covered and clearly marked. Store your raw meat, your poultry, and fish separately from ready-to-eat foods. This will help prevent cross-contamination. Now, a separate walk-in refrigerator would be ideal, but if you have to store food in the same walk-in, place prepared foods and those that are ready to eat above the raw foods. One thing you gotta do, you must limit the number of trips to the walk-in, and you gotta make sure that that door is properly closed. And if you cannot maintain product temperature, that unit must be fixed. Here again, it's all about the food. Frozen foods have to be kept frozen. Store food using FIFO and keep that freezer closed as much as possible. And defrost freezers on a regular basis to keep them running right. Your dry storage areas seem to always be taken for granted. And if you're not careful, you can wind up with all kinds of stuff in there. The purpose of the dry storage area is to keep your product safe and dry. Moisture can damage your product and attract pests. Keep storerooms cool, dry, and well ventilated. Temperatures should be kept between 50 and 70 degrees, that's 10 and 21 Celsius or lower. Store your food at least 6 inches, that's 15 centimeters off the floor and away from the wall so that you can keep the area clean and keep those pests away. And don't forget about FIFO. Like everything else in this world, there's a right way and there's a wrong way to do things. We do them the right way. Because food safety is just too important to do it any other way. That's why we put a lot of time and effort into training our people right. You know, it's like I said before, there's a lot to do in this job. And the only way that I can get it done is with a good staff. And mine is the best. I know them, I believe in them, and I trust them. And together we get the job done, and we get it done right.
I've been doing this for a long time.
We got hungry people out there, Darius. I need that broccoli steak.
Learned it in the Army, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, 16 years ago.
All right, you just a regular Vegemanic. Hey, let's get that stir fry happening. Let's go, everybody. Let's move.
Since then, seems like I've worked in every hotel and restaurant between Missouri and McKinley College. I don't even want to think about how many meals I prepared. It would make me feel old. Well, you know what they say. It's not the years, it's the mileage. Well, people talk about pride and professionalism all the time in this business. I've got plenty of both, and I'm teaching it to my teams. In my cafeteria, the people that eat here aren't just hungry students, they're my guests. They expect good, safe,